A few weeks ago, I published a video documenting my thoughts on the California Forever project, which is to build a new city in Solano County, California, which I recommend watching, by the way. But then, Jan Sramek, the CEO and founder of California Forever, actually reached out to me and offered to fly me out to meet him and his team and check out the site of the East Solano plan. And so, that's exactly what I did. After what was a bit of a journey, I arrived at their very nice office space where I was provided some lovely box water before meeting Jan and taking off on the exciting journey towards the site. Before we get going with the interview, I just want to say that Jan was so generous to provide me this incredible opportunity, and that what was clear from the offset is that this is something that he is truly passionate about, and he really is an urbanism nerd, just like I'm sure many of you guys are. I was talking to his assistant Julia before he arrived at the office about gentle density and building heights, and then once he entered the conversation, he immediately started referencing studies he had read about building heights and their impact on happiness, getting into great detail, and this is the sort of stuff you'd want to hear from people who are leading this kind of project. I also have to mention that if you'd like to see the full, uncut, 90-minute experience with Jan at the site, it is available exclusively on my Patreon page. I'll leave a link to it below. And now, a shout out to my Master Architect tier members, Michael Goldman, João Baptista, and my dad. But going into this interview, I wanted to make sure I asked the important questions that a lot of you guys had about the project from my last video. And so I immediately asked him about transit infrastructure in the new city connecting to something like BART. Here's what he said, and I know some of you won't like this answer, but just hear him out.
One of the few things that we need to do to fix the transportation issue is to widen this highway. And we are widening about 10, 11 miles of highway that clearly there's tons of room, there's tons of right-of-way here on both sides of the highway.
Right.
We're not exactly running it through the Sierra Nevada. I mean, you're running a highway through a flat piece of non-productive agricultural land. And even the county's own analysis concluded that the people who live in the new community would drive far less than the people who live in the rest of Solano County.
Right.
So this would already be VNT reducing. And we are not proposing widening a highway to then go build a bunch of suburbs around it. We're proposing building it to connect it to a community where the vast majority of trips are going to be internally in the community. I think we need to really start making the distinction between kind of internal transportation within cities and external transportation between them. And I am all for transit in the Bay Area, and we're going to have a really incredible bus network running from the new community to places like Fairfield and places like San Francisco. And in the long run, we hope that we'll be able to connect to the rail network here in the Bay Area, and we have a freight rail spur in the new community that we are looking at building. But I think that we have to recognize the reality that Northern California is a car-centric transport environment,
Right.
And people are going to drive from city to city just because that's the existing land use here. But if we can build a place here for 400,000 people where 80-90% of the trips they make are inside the city for entertainment, to see their friends, for work, to take their kids to school, then that's a huge improvement on what we have here. And if they need to take a car to go to the Bay Area for a meeting, I think that's still better than if they move to a suburb in Stockton or in the Central Valley, or if they move to Texas.
So do you think that rail spur would eventually connect up to BART? Is that what you would imagine?
That's outside of our control. So what we have is there's an old rail spur in the new community that could connect to the main Capital Corridor line. Now, we don't operate either BART or Capital Corridor, and there would need to be a lot more people in the new community for them to justify investing in bringing any kind of passenger rail service there.
Right.
But the option is there. What we do want to do from day one is we are looking into whether it's possible to re-establish that rail spur or build a new one and use that to bring construction materials to the new community.
Right.
And so I think every rail car takes as much cargo as 4 semi-trucks. And so if we can build a rail spur to bring construction materials right into the middle of the new community, that's going to take thousands of trucks off the road. So it might become light rail eventually. The way we've designed it is we've really wanted to make sure that we reserve the right of way.
Right.
And so we have this system of super blocks inspired by Barcelona and Japan. It's a very American grid with that influence. And every half a mile, we have basically a boulevard that has dedicated, right now in the beginning, BRT running in the center median. And that means that over time, it could become light rail, or it could become kind of smaller shuttles, autonomous shuttles, any combination of those.
Right.
Light rail is significantly more expensive to build in the early days, and we really care about the community being affordable to people from all walks of life. And so we want to be reasonable about it, but it's definitely something that we could expand into. We think we have a really powerful way to manage the affordability in the new community, which is the scale of it. And so people ask, well, why are you asking for this entitlement to build it up to 400,000 people? Why not start smaller? And we think that's really important that it's planned for that scale from the beginning and that there's room to grow. Because the best way to keep the community affordable is that every year we are building more and more homes and supplying them to the market as the community grows. And that's what happened historically. Places like the expensive suburbs in California, when they started being built, they were pretty affordable. But at some point, they kind of built them out, they reached the final scale, and then the builders stopped selling new homes, and that meant that everyone moving in had to basically buy the home from someone who was already there. And that's what made them expensive. And we want to have a 40-year runway to keep building into it. In terms of the traditional architecture, I think one of the open questions for us is how much that would add to the cost of the homes in terms of construction costs and design costs. I'm optimistic that it's something we'll be able to solve and do it without increasing the price in a big way. But it is certainly a concern, and we don't really have a lot of examples of people or communities that have managed to build a lot of traditional architecture at an affordable price point in America. And so we have concerns about, is the supply chain there in terms of everything from architects to engineering, but even just the labor force to build some of the ornamentation that you would need. And I mean, I was shocked to discover through working on this for the last almost decade that many architecture schools in America basically don't teach traditional architecture at all anymore. There's some notable exceptions that I love, like Notre Dame, but many of the other ones don't teach it. And so we're going to have to rebuild all of that and rediscover the art of, I think, both the urban design of how do you build a great city, and then the architecture of how do you make it a great traditional city. The entire area on the left is what we've proposed to keep as a buffer around the base. It's about 15,000 acres. That's over 20 square miles, where we own the majority of it, and the only uses would be continued agricultural uses and then solar farms. So we would like to build one of the biggest solar farms in the country out here. We think it's a really suitable location for it, and it would be a really good complement to the big wind farm out there that we also own the majority of south of Highway 12.
Again, I'm sure alarm bells are ringing a lot for you guys right now, but before you go straight to the comments, later on in the conversation, this will be put into greater context. But first, let's hear what he has to say about the other huge controversy with this project: water.
We certainly respect the heritage of agriculture in the area, and by making the community really walkable and compact, we'll actually only be taking a small fraction of the land. So I think the holdings right now are somewhere over 65,000 acres, and the new community would be only about 15,000 acres. Solano County has a really broad range of agricultural types, and some of the best soils in California are in the area about 25 miles north of here around Dixon and Vacaville, where they grow tomatoes and almonds and all kinds of root crops. And then the area behind us, west of here in Suisun Valley, is a really up-and-coming wine region that is now producing some really great wines. And this area just doesn't have the same quality of soils. So historically, it's been used for cattle grazing and sheep grazing, and there's a lot of heritage, and we do want to support that industry. I think one of the things that's lost in the debate here is that Solano County in the last 40 years has paved over 10,000 acres of prime farmland, the best farmland in California, in the areas around Vacaville and Dixon. Ironically, what it's doing is we are paving over some of the best farmland in California and not building here. Right now, what's getting built in other parts of Solano County is traditional suburban neighborhoods. And some people really love them, and I think it's important that we have them, but we have a lot of them already. And what we need is choice. And in those neighborhoods, the population density is 5,000 people per square mile, whereas what we're proposing is, call it 20,000 people per square mile. And so if we are trying to house the next 50,000 people, the next generation out here, we can either put them on 10 square miles of the best farmland in California around Dixon and Vacaville at a density of 5,000 people per square mile, or we can increase the density by 4 times and put them on 2.5 square miles, on 1/4 of that land, and put them on the worst soil that we have in Solano County, which is out here. So we're going to drive in a few minutes by an almond orchard that someone tried to plant. They planted it about 10 years ago, and it didn't work out. The production is very low. The bet they had was that because the soil is cheaper or the land is cheaper, even if the production was lower, it would still pay out. That didn't really happen, which is why almond farming didn't spread in this area. But that almond orchard uses groundwater. 160 acres of almonds, and that almond orchard alone uses as much water as 10,000 people, plus the employment and retail uses and recreation uses you would expect around them. So that's just one almond orchard we're going to drive by. We're also going to drive by later another almond orchard that is much bigger, that is north of the base. That almond orchard uses enough water for about 70,000 people.
Wow.
I get why this was really controversial when we announced it. I mean, we did spend 8 years buying the property very quietly, and a lot of rumors happened as a result of that. And it's a really big change to Solano County, and so change is hard, and generally when things get proposed, and this is not unique to us, right? Development projects, when they get proposed, generally face a lot of opposition. And so I get the skepticism, but what's happened over the last year is that kind of after the initial period of controversy and whatnot expired, a lot of people looked at it and basically said, you know what, we never thought of developing out here. But it actually makes a lot more sense to build out here than continuing to grow Vacaville from 50,000 to 100,000 to 150,000 people. A lot of people had said, you know what, I think my city is the right size. I don't really want it to kind of sprawl endlessly. And we care about actually protecting agriculture, not the sensational headline of taking land out of agriculture. We care about actually protecting agriculture. And the majority of agriculture in Solano County is about growing of tomatoes and almonds and walnuts and wine and other crops, not about this land where, again, look at it, there's no cattle here, there's no sheep here, this
looks ripe for development.
So to me, the biggest difference is a year ago, the idea of developing here was, I think, taboo when we first introduced it. And in the last poll that we did in July, 65% of residents of Solano County, of the entire county, said that they support developing out here. This was an independent poll, 600 people, representative sample, all over the county, and 48% of them said that they support it strongly. I mean, you know how development works in California. For anywhere for people to say they support something by 65% is very unusual. We did some town halls, and we did a couple of them, and there was one in Vacaville, and there were a few people that were very upset and kind of asking questions and being a little bit rude. And there were probably 50, 60 people in attendance. And I walked out of the room, and there was someone who really believed in the project and supported it. And she said, you don't realize you have fewer people here protesting, building a city for 400,000 people than we had people here in the audience when a developer came and tried to build one 4-story apartment building in Vacaville. And so I think the context often gets lost in these discussions. And we pulled it off the ballot as part of that agreement. And there were a lot of people out here who said, you know, we thought you guys were just coming in and you were going to kind of ram it through no matter what. And the fact that you were willing to do that shows that you want to work with the community. We felt pretty good about it passing this year as well. I want to be clear. I think it would have been a coin flip, but I think we would have landed on the right side of it. The point of it here wasn't to win an election, right? It's to build something really incredible over the next 4 years. And the thing that was lost about the discussion to delay the vote is this new process doesn't change the timeline for when a shovel is in the ground. And so our previous process was to do the zoning vote this year and then work with the county on the environmental impact report and a development agreement over the next 2 years. And then have shovels in the ground in 2027, 2028. And this new process is to work with the county on the environmental impact report and the development agreement and the zoning, and then bring it back together all for one big approval in 2026. And as long as that passes, the shovels are still in the ground in 27, 28. And so it doesn't move the construction timeline. And so it was just an opportunity for a better process that doesn't move the construction date. And we were pretty excited about that.
He explained how when they had bought the land, that the landowners made 300% profit for when they had bought the land, and that many of the previous landowners took the profit and with it bought far more fertile farmland further up north, by just a few miles, and are now making more money than ever. And that, in many cases, the landowners weren't even living on the property, but had it passed down to them and were ready to sell it.
You can kind of see here, even on the satellite map, that something about the site is different. If you look at the whole Northern California mega region, you've got green irrigated land that is for agriculture. There's kind of mountains and parks and hills. There's obviously water, and then we have cities. Then there's this big yellow dot in the middle. And it's clearly not yellow because of lack of water. There's a river around it. As I said, there's water rights here. It's yellow because it happens to have soils that even when it doesn't pay to irrigate them. The productivity is not there. They're very heavy soils. The roots can't get through. And so we've purchased the majority of this yellow area. What we're proposing here is kind of like a sandwich. We have a existing wind farm at the bottom of the site. We have a new community that's going in the middle. And then in this area around the base, we're building the buffer for the military base. Into it, we're putting solar farms. It's a really good dual use of the property.
He then goes on to explain that due to the city's efficiency and sustainability practices, that each home will have half the water usage as compared to their typical suburban counterparts, and expect about 70% water recycling rate. In LA, the number is 2%.
So we just finished driving through what would be the new city. And then this area ahead of us is about half a mile of what we've proposed in the plans to be the Rio Vista Parkland, which is the community buffer between the new community and the city of Rio Vista. And so what we're driving to now here is a subdivision called Liberty. And what's interesting about that is 5 years ago, all of the land that the houses are built on looked exactly like this. So this is a new subdivision that was built here over the last 5 years. The land is the same type of land that we own, that we are proposing to build on. This is basically fully sold out.
There's already another 320-acre car-centric extension approved for construction, and we eventually drove to another one near Fairfield. Yet again, another sprawling waste.
I think it shows a couple of things. I think it shows that, number one, people clearly want to live here. Even if you don't bring new jobs, even if you don't bring shops and restaurants and so on, people want to live here. We desperately need housing in California. It shows that we are already building on this land. So then I think the question is, what do we want to build on it? And I think option A is we build
more of this.
We build more of this. And look, I mean, I think we can do better. I really respect the people who build this. I really respect the people who want to live in it. We have, if you look at Solano County, probably 95% of the housing stock is going to look like this. And I don't think, and I know that that's not what 95% of people want to live in. And so I think the choice is pretty clear. It's, do you want to build more of this, which is something we already have a lot of, which has homes that your kid can't walk to school, you can't walk to a grocery store. The density is 5 times less than what we propose, so it's going to take 5 times more land, and probably 2 times more water than what we are proposing. And there's going to be no jobs because it doesn't have the scale to attract the jobs. We can build a complete community where your kids can walk to school and you can walk to work and you can go for dinner, and we can bring all of this employment, and we can do it much more sustainably, whether it's from a land perspective or a water perspective or a climate perspective.
We got out of the car and he showed me the map.
And we have an industrial technology zone around here, basically on the northwestern side of the city. Then we have a downtown here, which is a square mile. Between the downtown and the industry and technology zone, we're trying to replicate something that exists in old cities that we are really fond of. We're calling this the maker and manufacturing zone. And what it tries to be is, you know how in old cities you have this warehouse district that used to be warehouses off the downtown, and now it's entertainment and lofts and galleries and small businesses and nightclubs. So we're trying to do that here, replicate it here.
He then, amongst the heavy winds, points out this dried up creek called the Big Ditch, which has dried out over the years, and how it would be rejuvenated back into life and become the central park for the city. Pretty cool. He also explained that they want to encourage more organic development, something that the modern master plan cities fail to do, and that their zoning code will only be about 40 pages long as opposed to San Francisco's several thousand pages. They want to encourage architects and designers to come to the city and let the city emerge from there, rather than having a strict top-down approach. The only exclusive rules that they have is a minimum density, unseen anywhere else in the country, and that every home must be within a 10-minute walk of a school, shopping street, and park.
We think that there's 14 neighborhoods inside the city. And so if it's 400,000 people, 40 neighborhoods, it's between 30 and 40,000 people per neighborhood. Each of the neighborhoods is anchored by a district park. And we've looked at a few different organizations for the parks, from very formal, like in Savannah, Georgia, where it's very, very formal when you look at how they laid out the parks in the city, all the way to very organic places. And we've landed at kind of a modified version somewhere in between. We generally have a structure in that we place the schools at the heart of each neighborhood. And so in America, there's this, I think, really depressing trend of when people build new neighborhoods, the school is next to the highway at the edge of the community.
Yep.
I think that's just really sad. And so what we've done is we've put the schools in the heart of the community, in each of the neighborhoods, and then we generally locate the school not on the shopping street, but a block or two away, and then we locate it next to the park. Perfect. So the idea is that, number one, the school and the park should be able to have joint use of the sports facilities,
Right.
so that we maximize the access for both the students and the residents to high quality sports facilities, because they end up using them at different times of the day, right?
Right.
When you want to go play soccer with your friends in the evening, the school doesn't need the facilities, and vice versa. We located the schools a couple of the blocks from the shopping street, because the idea is you should be able to go and pick up your kids from school and then do some shopping and go home and get there on a bike or by walking. It's something that we've been thinking about a lot, is how do we give it character and flavor and flair as a city, and then make it feel off the place and make it feel Solano.
Right.
And it's particularly relevant, I think, because Solano is a really interesting mix of different cultures and geographies. And in some sense, there's been an opportunity and a challenge where right now there isn't a Solano County identity. If you look at the county and you ask people in the county how they feel about it, they say, well, there's the southwestern part of the county, places like Benicia and Vallejo, that really feel like they are distinctly Bay Area. There is the northeastern part of the county, like Vacaville and Dixon, which culturally are much closer to Sacramento and the Central Valley.
Right.
Then there's the eastern portion of the county, which is culturally kind of Delta. There's a lot of boating and Delta influence. And then there's the west portion of the county, which is just across a mountain range from Napa, which is this emerging wine region called Suisun Valley, which feels like Napa. And then Fairfield and Suisun are kind of in the middle of all of that. And that's been both an opportunity and a challenge for the county, where people have said it would be nice for the county to have more of a unified heritage and sense of identity. And we certainly hope that this project can be part of forming it.
Getting deeper into the city layout, he then explained how the city's grid will be crucial for creating, quote, urban rooms, which is a crucial aspect of classical urban planning, in order to minimize aggressive winds and keep the climate pleasant, which is something that really impressed me.
This is the west side of the site.
Right.
So now we are in Fairfield, and this is a development called One Lake, which was, again, built on the same type of land that we want to build on.
Right.
So you can see on the left there, across the railroad tracks, that land looks exactly like what we're building on. This looked exactly like that 5-6 years ago when they started building. Again, the developer here built a suburban product. But again, I think what this shows is, number one, development is coming to this side from both sides, whether it's us or someone else.
Right.
And so I really think that it makes sense to do something great there and build an actual city with jobs and schools and shops and make it walkable and sustainable.
Right.
Instead of just building more subdivisions. I think it shows that there's a lot of demand to live here.
And I'm sure many of them commute to Silicon Valley every day.
They do. They do. And so we actually hope to make life better for a lot of the people who live here by bringing a lot of the jobs from Silicon Valley out here.
Right.
And then people who live here can have a 20-minute commute.
Right.
And we can take them over, which is part of the story for how we take them off Highway 80. If these people are now commuting 20 minutes to the new city, they don't have to go and sit on the 80 and then sit on the 101. And that makes traffic better for the rest of the area. And then they're building a bigger phase 2 here and you can see sticks are going up right now.
Yeah.
There's several thousand more homes out there. And that actually brings me back to a question you asked earlier about jobs. Solano County has a really interesting history with commuting. It's the part of the Bay Area where more people than anywhere else have to leave the county every day for work. I think more than 50% of the residents commute out of the county every day. I know people who live here who commute to Mountain View 3 times a week.
Wow.
That's about a 2-hour commute.
Yeah.
And it's been a long-running problem. It happened because it's a county that was squeezed between San Francisco and Silicon Valley and Sacramento.
Yeah.
And so historically what's happened is all of the jobs have gone to those 2 places.
Mm-hmm.
And then Solano County got the homes. And so
Right.
Solano County local people here will say we are a bedroom community or a series of bedroom communities.
Mm-hmm.
And the government recognized this going all the way back to 1970s or 80s. There was a plan to build a Dow Chemical factory here. And the county report in connection with that said the fact that 20% of Solano County residents have to commute for work is a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to do something about it. We have to bring industry here. This was in 1970 or 1980. That plan
Right.
didn't work. And the number has gone since then from 20% to 50%.
Wow.
So for 40 years, it's been getting worse. And nobody ever succeeded in really bringing jobs to Solano County. And a big part of the reason is that to successfully do it, you need a lot of critical mass. Now we are in a really interesting time in America where there's a real renaissance in advanced manufacturing and energy and building of data centers and building of vertical farms and agricultural innovations and defense and aerospace.
Mm-hmm.
And we think there's this really interesting window for the next couple of years to bring that industry to Solano County.
To finally bring us back to the start of this conversation with the talk of the highway widening, this is how traffic will go down overall, even with the widening, because it's all about where the traffic is actually going. With many cars not having to go all the way down to the Bay Area nearly as much, and instead being redirected towards a new community, not to mention the hordes of buses and shuttles that will be moving around Solano County for this new job center, then adding another lane is almost certainly going to be necessary. Especially because the people who live in these other suburbs, in places like Fairfield or Vacaville, will almost certainly be traversing from city to city by car. At some point, we just have to be realistic about our options. The other cities and neighborhoods in the county require car transit with how they're laid out, and there's nothing California Forever can do about that. So this is their best alternative. But let's hear about some of these jobs that may be coming to the new city.
There's a lot of history here of the military with the Air Force Base, of clearly agriculture. And then for the last 10 years, a lot of the things that have been financed and invented in Silicon Valley have for the first time started to touch the physical world again.
Mm-hmm.
They've been, again, advanced manufacturing and defense and vertical farms. And you can't build those things in Palo Alto.
Right.
There's not enough land, there's not enough workforce, it's too expensive to build it there.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now what happens is we invent some magical thing in Silicon Valley, and then we build a prototype, and then you need to build a first scaling factory for 400 people, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And the founders really want to build it in California, and they look at all of these locations and they can't find somewhere that has the combination of available land and quick permitting and workforce and housing that people can afford and energy. And then they try, but they can't make it work. And so then they end up putting it in Texas or in Phoenix or in Florida.
Right.
And we think there's an opportunity to bring all of those jobs to Solano County.
Wow.
If we can solve the challenges, and that can make commutes better for everyone, not just the people who live in the new community, but also the people who live in Vacaville and Dixon and Rio Vista and Fairfield.
Right,
And so
right.
even people who live in Benicia and Vallejo will have a much better commute if the jobs come here. One of the things we announced was 12 companies who endorsed the East Solano plan and who said that if the voters here approve the project and it gets built, they would like to bring jobs to Solano County. We really tried to find industries that had linked to Solano County that would make it easier for people who live here to get those jobs.
Yeah.
A few examples. So I said there's a big veteran population here and an Air Force history. We announced a company called Hadrian, which does advanced manufacturing precision parts for defense, aerospace, and military. They actually said that if we had shovel-ready land in the new community ready right now, they would already be building it today. We had a company like Zipline, which manufactures drones. And then we had a couple of companies in the agricultural sector, including a company called Plenty. Plenty invented a way to grow food basically indoors with LED lights. They can grow food with 99% less land and 90% less water.
Wow.
I think they just opened a huge facility in Virginia. It's a 140-acre campus. They opened the first of 6 or 7 facilities.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that each of those facilities will produce tens of millions of dollars of food every year. For context, the entire 15,000 acres that we want to build on, the new community, total annual agricultural production, according to both the county report and our report, is about $6 million. The 17 or 15,000 acres produces less food a year than one vertical farm.
Wow.
On 20 acres. And the jobs are better, right? Because those jobs can be better paying jobs because they have high
More
productivity.
innovative, right.
And so that's the kind of industry that we want to bring here. Yeah, I mean, if we just build one of those, then we can build a new city and actually increase the agricultural production of the county and the number of people employed in agriculture here. And then, I mean, those farms are really interesting and exciting. I think one of the first types of produce that they are building is strawberries. The magic of a vertical farm is you can produce the perfect tasting strawberry all year round because you control the light and the water and the temperature. And so instead of just having the best strawberries in June or May or something like that, or July, you can have that all year round.
It looks like the people of the new community can look forward to an abundance of local produce then. And last thing before we went our separate ways, Jan showed me some pretty cool maps from 1960 back in the office that were meant to predict development patterns in Northern California.
When you get to 2020, they predicted that there would be a city exactly where we are putting the downtown.
Wow.
So literally 66 years ago, the federal government, 2 different agencies, concluded that it was a good idea to build a city out here.
And at around this time.
Right around this time. Wow. So we are basically correctly on time. And so that gives us a lot of confidence that this is a good idea.
And so, there it is. Let's hear what my immediate thoughts were on this experience. In the bottom floor of the office building in the lobby, charging my phone because my phone was about to die from all that shooting. But oh my goodness, that was such an amazing experience. I feel like pretty much every possible question you could have possibly had about this project was answered and thoroughly, and I hope it clears up a lot of questions, issues, concerns that you guys had about the project. But also, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm very excited about what's going on, and way more so now than even just before, from just the research I had done on it. So yeah, seeing the site, seeing how it's all going to come together, I mean, what a treat. And I'll speak more about this when I'm back home, but just incredible. It's been a few days, and I just want to say a huge thank you to Jan for reaching out and wanting to make this happen and flying me over. It really was such a privilege. And also to the whole California Forever team who put all the logistics together and were so welcoming on the day. The whole experience was really so pleasant, and most importantly, you really got the sense that these people, especially Jan, really care about this project and doing something that will have an immensely positive impact. They are not just in it for a quick buck. They want to make something truly special, and they clearly care about doing the right thing. We spoke a bunch off camera about family and the importance of building great communities for families, particularly young families, and future generations to thrive in a way that unfortunately many can't today, either due to car-centric suburbia or affordability or both. And Jan is also super into architecture and does want the new city to be beautiful, even if he's taking a more hands-off approach with the zoning code. And so I think a lot of the media around this project are hit pieces that fail to provide full context. But ultimately, if the residents of Solano County come 2026 end up overwhelmingly supporting the project on the ballot, I think that will speak for itself, and hopefully all the unfair criticism will dissipate. Will that happen? I do think so. There's so many positive elements to this project that would be too good to refuse. And of course, the consequences of not building this project would also be quite detrimental. More car suburbia and sprawl, not just in general, but in Solano County. And like Jan said, I think the residents are realizing that they actually don't want that. And so this is by far the best alternative, and I'm going to continue to support it. Hopefully soon I can head up there again and be able to show you guys some progress. Until then, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.